And we're back with House Homeland Security Chairman Mike McCaul, who joins us from Austin, Texas. Mr. Chairman, you've traveled to Europe. You've talked to security officials there. How far do they have to go to get up to speed to counter these kinds of attacks?
Well, John, I think in many ways, I think Europe is in a pre-9/11 posture. They have many intelligence and security gaps. I traveled over there prior to the Paris attacks, met with the Belgian Minister of Interior, met with counterterrorism officials in France, went to Turkey. The phenomenon here is the foreign fighter threat, the revolving door from Europe to the region in Iraq and Syria and back through Turkey, back into Europe. And that's what happened in the Paris attackers. And now we know the nexus between the cells that became operational in Paris and now the ones that attacked in Brussels, all part of the same network, same bomb maker, and all tied to the foreign fighter threat. These are trained militants that have gone to the region and have come back, and it's one of the greatest threats that Europe has because they're not prepared for it from a security standpoint.
When you look at an attack like this, what are you looking for in terms of your job in thinking about Homeland Security for America?
Well, what I'm concerned about are two things. I think one that John Miller talked about, and that's the radicalization over the internet that ISIS is very adept at doing. The other one is the foreign fighter threat. So we have 40,000 foreign fighters that have converged into Iraq and Syria from 120 different countries, 6,000 Western passports. Thousands have come back to Europe, but hundreds have left the United States and gone to the region. Many have returned. Those are the suspects that we're most concerned about in the United States. And then finally, the idea that there are ISIS followers in the United States talking to ISIS in Raqqa and being influenced by them. And the thing that is the biggest challenge to federal law enforcement is the fact that they're communicating in darkness, what's called encryption. We can't see what they're saying. And if you can't see what they're saying in advance, it's very hard to stop it.
What's your sense of those hundreds of foreign fighters in America? How much of a handle does law enforcement have on who they are, where they are in America right now?
I think we have a relatively good assurance. We don't know, that without good intelligence on the ground in Syria, it's hard to know exactly how many have left and returned, but the number is around 250. The ones who have returned are being monitored. I know that after the Brussels attacks, that we are obviously ramping up coverage on these individuals. Those are the ones I'm most concerned about. But again, John, also the communications coming out of Syria from ISIS into the United States to attack, an attack where you are, and when it's in darkness and in a dark space and we can't see it, that's a real threat.
The areas that were attacked here in Brussels, soft targets, airports, subways. Why should Americans not be worried about the airports and subways in America? What's the distinction between America and Europe?
Well, I think the threat's higher in Europe because of the number of foreign fighters. They also don't share databases as well as we do, or intelligence. They have a lot of restrictions with their laws that they need to change. We are, however, I talked to the TSA administrator who actually landed at Brussels when the bombing occurred, and we are ramping up security at train stations, at airports, at subway systems using canines and other things, both visible and invisible. So there are things happening behind the scenes you may not see, but I want to give the American people assurances that we are protecting them. I think the other thing that concerns me, John, is ISIS came out with a recent video calling for attacks like a Paris-style or Brussels attack in the United States. And it's the type of individual inspired by this propaganda that concerns us as well.
I'd like to ask you about Senator Ted Cruz's comments about securing and patrolling Muslim neighborhoods. What do you think of that idea?
Well, in Europe, you have a very different situation than you do in the United States. In Europe, it's very segregated, and you have the diasporas in Belgium that I saw, and they're being radicalized because they're not assimilated with the culture. I don't think we have that same situation in the United States. And I know that the NYPD, as John Miller talked about, really have a great outreach program to the Muslim community. I think the effective thing is I passed this bill to combat violent extremism in the United States is effective outreach to the Muslim community, so you can pull the religious leaders really onto our team, if you will, to protect us from radicalization from within those communities.
Do you think
I think to send inflammatory messages could actually have an unintended consequence.
Well, that's in the 30 seconds we have left. I want to just follow up on that. Do you think that this kind of surveillance would create the sense of radicalization that we see in Europe here in America?
I think we can get good intelligence from the Muslim communities in our outreach efforts, in our working with the religious leaders in the communities in the United States. You know, I was a federal prosecutor. You know, there were times when that was called for.
Mr. Chairman,
but under the Constitution.
We're going to have to end it there. I'm sorry to interrupt. That's all the time we have. We'll be right back.